Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, help me stand. I am tired, I am weak, and I am worn. Through the storm, through the night, lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord.
And attacks anyone who doesn't offer uncritical support.
All these different movements that were popping up in industrial cities in the 60s and 70s.
We're sick and tired of this Uncle Tom leadership. That's why we have bills here.
People thought that these were black organizations, ran by black people, for the uplift of black people. People genuinely thought that.
I want to comment about the outside agitators that the mayor claims is coming into Buffalo to create the disorders.
What these short films of Saul Alinsky showed is that it was actually white Marxists.
Alinsky sent in Dick Harmon as staff director.
Once I give the word to go, we're off. There will be no turning back.
Alinsky sends in Ed Chambers, his top organizer. Chambers works quickly to set up the local organization in time to avoid another summer of violence.
Every organization that we build is built on a multi-issued basis. The worst thing you can do, and one of the reasons why some of the civil rights, or a large part of the civil rights movement, went dead, is to organize around a single issue. It becomes a straitjacket.
Number one, chronic unemployment of adults and teenagers. Number two, inferior education. Number three, your slumlords. Number four, police brutality. Number five, the lack of recreation facilities. There's one swimming pool to every 50,000 Negroes, and there are...
Take a single issue, and you literally lock out a large part of potential membership who may be sympathetic to the...
It was very surprising to find this footage because it puts his words out there. It puts the strategy out there that communists and Marxists and socialists, whatever you want to call them, that they've been putting into practice for a very long time.
The beautiful execution of power.
You had these black pastors taking marching orders.
One spokesman is always selected.
May I have your attention, please? We're going to the mayor's office and then to the Chamber of Commerce. I'm Reverend Fletcher Bryant, who will be the spokesman. I am the spokesman, one spokesman for the organization. A week ago,
He is told that he's got to have a specific question and stay with it.
a specific requests in regard to jobs in the face of a crisis in job inequities in the Negro community.
Some 916 jobs appear to be available. That includes the 600 jobs that the county is making available.
Never let the mayor get off of it.
But then you're saying that they have not delivered at this point. And the second point I'd like to raise...
You're saying it. I'm not saying
This
it.
is one thing in terms of tactics. You sit with a political leader and you say, this is the question.
Are these jobs of a temporary or permanent nature?
I haven't got the full specifics on them. Some of them will be...
You don't hear.
temporary, but
Do you recognize us or don't you?
Well, let me at this time, Mr. Mayor, make crystal clear Bill's position on this job matter.
To the extent that you have black pastors involved.
Minister Florence, were you successful in getting the Kodak stockholders list?
These were just black frontmen.
they denied us the right to see it again. Same racist tactic.
Saul Alinsky is very strategic in what he's doing.
Minister Florence interrupted him, calling for a point of order. As
He's very calculated in his approach to organize people and to effect change.
If you don't give us our shit!
It made me think about Black Lives Matter because Black Lives Matter is a modern organization.
The reality is that race in the United States operates on a spectrum from black to white.
The prevailing narrative is that 3 black women who are concerned about black people, who love black people. These are the women who started Black Lives Matter, and that it's a black movement, and every white person associated with it is merely an ally.
It is a tool for our allies to show up differently for us.
I was wondering, is there a white Marxist behind Black Lives Matter?
Displacement, genocide, and climate crimes. Is that a laundry list or a web of connected crises? Our next guest has been helping people's movements make the links for decades now. He's Eric Mann of the Labor Community Strategy Center right here in Los Angeles. How did you get started?
Well, I come out of a Jewish socialist.
What I found is Eric Mann.
I've been organizing with the Congress of Racial Equality, Students for Democratic Society, worked with the Black Panther Party, was in SDS, was in Weatherman, went to prison for political issues.
When you look into Eric Mann, you look at what he believes and what he wants.
Free the U.S. 2 million prisoners and 100,000 less police. Free, safe, and legal abortion with public support and financing, and minors having the right to abortion without parental consent. Reparations for the transatlantic slave trade, unconditional amnesty and option of citizenship for 12 million immigrants, end the war on drugs, the war on crime, the war on gangs, and the war on terror.
After you put these ideas out, you got to train organizers, and we have been able to recruit young Black and Latino kids.
My name is Patrice Cullors. I am the co-founder of Black Lives Matter. I'm also the executive director of the Black Lives Matter Global Network.
She came out of the bus riders union. She's grown up in South LA. Patrice wants the stage. In some way wants to occupy it.
It is our duty to fight for freedom.
It is our duty to fight for freedom.
It is our duty to win.
You work with each person to say, you need to lead. I only have an army of generals.
I do believe in Marxism. It's a philosophy that I learned really early on in my organizing career. We were taught to learn about the systems that were criticizing capitalism.
Whenever Patrice Cullors said we're trained Marxists, she was telling the truth. She's a trained Marxist. And Eric Mann is the man who trained her.
I spend my time right now organizing mainly young people that want to be revolutionaries. Young, primarily women, Black, Latina, Asian.
It's essentially based on guerrilla warfare principles, which is you're up against a far more powerful enemy. And you have a very small little army. And you're trying to figure out with this little army that maybe at best is like a flea bite. You know, how do you kill an elephant with flea bites?
We start with the intersection of the Black and Latino community as a strategic alliance that's central to building a broader multiracial left.
This is the father of Black Lives Matter.
The Black trans women who have been murdered.
To the extent that Black people are involved, these are useful idiots. These are people who are fronts to carry out the agenda of white Marxists.
If we don't have a base in the Black and Latino community, we can't branch out. You gotta have a strategy, and that's at least my strategy. We don't believe that majority white organizations can be transformative organizations.
Black Lives Matter, it's a white-run organization. It's a white movement. And it's all about destroying America and using people of color in the process.
And so it has been, with but minor variations in one country after another. Divide the people. Get them fighting among themselves rather than their common enemy. For well do they know that the nation so divided and weakened can be easily conquered from within.
This entire block
create the appearance of popular support
George Floyd
through a favorable press and the use of terror, intimidation, and the creation of martyrs make the world believe the revolution is a popular one, particularly among those being liberated. Neutralize the opposition.
This guy right here is a racist! He's a white supremacist!
When obstructionists to the cause become too irritating, label them as fascist, Nazi, anti-Semitic, extremist, racist, controversial. Precipitate mob violence. Get the mobs into the streets. March and demonstrate. As the demonstrations grow in number and intensity, they will acquire political character through the desired collision and open combat with the forces of law and order.
We're watching young people being informed by people who are leveraging their emotion.
They don't realize that they have been drawn into a very radical movement where their lives will be taken over.
When I came to the organization, when I was organized into the organization, I was 17 and a half. I was really angry, and I didn't have a direction. I just was spewing anger. I was angry at...
Anytime you want to start a movement or you want to brainwash the people, you have to deal with those who are angry.
If you're not angry, you're not with me.
Then the communist movement can come in and pretend to be a friend to use you.
1968. The wheels were coming off the wagons. Dr. King was assassinated. We became white race conscious.
Now they after the white people, they gonna congregate. They gonna caravan out in Inglewood, Clear Del Rey, and everywhere else the white man's supposed to stay. They gonna do the white man in tonight, and I'm just waiting out.
We went from being the nice Catholic kid to the angry black kid. I was angry about things that happened in the past. I was angry about things that were gonna happen in the future. If you said good morning to me, I was angry. If you didn't say good morning, I was angry. And people exploited that. I remember going to Harvard Square. All night we were rioting. And I got back home. And I couldn't explain to myself why I just did that.
You will be used, you will be taken advantage of, because you cannot see what you're getting into. You can't see.
The first conscious act in organizing our people is to let them know who they are. If you think you're an American, you will fight to protect the interests of capitalist America. If you know you ain't no American, you'll fight to destroy every aspect of American capitalism.
All of us come from somewhere. All of us have origin stories. Why do I, as a black man, have this nice, wholesome German name? It's because of slavery. It's important for me to know that story. But it's also important for me to recognize that as an American, I have another origin story. And that origin story is not 1619. It's 1776. Because that's America's origin story. And I am an American. And that origin story is filled with suffering and struggle and bloodshed and overcoming adversity. An Irish person whose family survived the Irish potato famine and then came to America. It's part of our origin story as America. My Jewish brother whose family survived the Holocaust and then came to the United States. You could go on and on and on, and what you eventually realize is that God, in His providence, has brought us all from hardship.
Divine providence was clearly operating in the lives of Black Americans. Yes, slavery was horrible, But out of slavery came Black America. If you look at the accomplishments of blacks throughout history, that would not have happened had they not come to America. We are blessed.
It is a great satisfaction to have connected with the race of men and women who are able to do something that enhances the comforts and conveniences of life. As you go on, increasing your ability to do things of value, you will find that the problem, which often nowadays looks more and more difficult of solution, will gradually become easier.
Booker T. Washington was my hero. When I was in high school, they used to take us over to Tuskegee. Every summer, we would spend a week over there, staying in the dorm and learning about Booker T. Washington. A lot of black people don't understand what he was all about.
When he came to Alabama, when he came to Tuskegee, he pushed work, industry, and the books. He didn't have pity on these former slaves.
We must recognize the fact that our capacity is very largely different from that of the people of the white race. I know we like to say the opposite. It sounds well in compositions, does well in rhetoric, and makes a splendid essay. But to say that we are equal to whites is to say that slavery was no disadvantage to us. This is all we can say of ourselves. With proper development, our condition and capacity will be the same as those of the people of any other race.
He was influencing people to take advantage of their own lives. Do the best with what they had.
Getting out there and working hard and earning things on your own.
Be an entrepreneur. Start your own business. Build your community. We need to look to ourselves. We need to transform from within.
He urged black people to set your bucket where you are and make your success right there where you are.
Cast down your bucket where you are. A third and fourth speaker. For Walker was that. Cast down your bucket where you are. Captain of the first person, last,
It is said that necessity is the mother of invention. The need to have goods and products available to us in our community, entrepreneurs came up. Black stores, black doctors and dentists and other professionals established their business. Influenced by a Judeo-Christian ethic that says if you don't work, you don't eat. A Judeo-Christian ethic that talked about the father to be the provider and to take care of the family. Innovation and creativity produced the kind of responsiveness that we see take place. Texas, Georgia, Atlanta was bustling. Oklahoma.
No one ever loses anything by being a gentleman or a lady. No person ever lost anything by being broad. Remember that if we are kind and useful, if we are moral, no matter what people say about us, they cannot pull us down. But on the other hand, if we are without the spirit of usefulness, if we are without morality, without economy and property, without all those qualities which go to make a people and a nation great and strong, no matter what we say about ourselves, we are losing ground. Nobody can give us these qualities merely by praising us and talking well about us. And when we possess them, nobody can take them from us by speaking ill of us.
When you look at these pictures, you get a sense of what black life was like in an era where we're told that black people were unhappy.
Some of them look pretty prosperous.
Richard Samuel Roberts, he captured almost 2 decades of black life in the South during a time when today we're told black people could not mobilize upward. And in these photos, it tells a true story.
After slavery ended, there were a lot of very successful black people. They abounded in a lot of different places.
I grew up down in Alabama. When I was growing up, we were not raised to hate. We were never taught that America was bad and that we were not Americans. We were raised to love America. We were taught about slavery, but not in a way where it made you hate. My family and other black people around me were working, their own land. Those that wanted to go to college went to college, or they started their own business.
My father was born in 1915 in the Jim Crow South, Athens, Georgia. My father always taught my brothers and me that when the door is wide open, I never felt like I was a victim. I never even felt we were poor. I remember thinking my father was rich. I remember asking my father for a quarter, and he went in his pocket and he gave it to me, and I thought, my dad was rich. My dad was a janitor.
Elder did not come to his politics by accident. His father, Randolph, was dirt poor with little education. He went to night school, held down 2 jobs, and raised a family.
He was a janitor until I was 10 years old. Then he started a little small business, a cafe not too far from downtown LA. And my father was always about working hard and not making excuses.
When Larry says, look, if you just forget the issue of racism, just put your head down, study hard, work hard, you're going to be all right in the end. You think that's true?
It worked for me. It worked for me.
That was Black America, but it's an America that we don't learn about, specifically because whenever you have something to be proud of, people have less of a chance of controlling you.
People walk around talking about make America great again. Give me the date that America was great for everybody. It wasn't great for blacks when we were enslaved and then had to fight Jim Crow and then fight for the right to vote.
It has now gotten to the point where it is impossible for me to believe black leaders and the black struggle in America. I see the lies and the manipulation from the media, black leaders, the dumb, ignorant, cowardice, brain dead people who are ruining our country on a false narrative. I'm willing to deny 90% of what people are saying.
You know, I imagine the slaves.
Here's why.
Thought, thank God we're gonna all be one.
The first legal slave owner was a black man. Hundreds of black people owned slaves during slavery. But yet our entire plight of the black community is because of slavery. Look at the 1920s and 30s when Black Wall Street was around and black people prospered. Black people were successful, they were working hard, they were building things. Concentration of black success and wealth in the 20s and 30s that we don't even see today after the Civil Rights Movement. I'm starting to become skeptical of the civil rights movement. We are not told the entire truth of the civil rights movement because Martin Luther King was a socialist.
Free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Are we just hearing his one speech and people are glorifying his one speech like they glorify BLM?
Racism is not only happening in the United States.
In 20 years from now, Black Lives Matter is going to be the new Martin Luther King movement. And nobody's going to correct history.
Dramatic videotape obtained by Channel 5 News shows what appears to be a group of LAPD officers beating a suspect.
Many of us who had been trying to convince the public that these kind of incidences were happening were almost relieved. It was like, finally, it was on camera.
This is why you can hardly ever trust black people in this country.
King suffered a fracture.
I did not know that Rodney King took cops on a high-speed chase. And then I went back in the context of that whole scenario. Rodney King never complied. Rodney King was a criminal, ruining the black community almost every year of his life. And all of a sudden he becomes a god.
Buildings on fire.
Oh my God.
Terrible. And there's no police presence there.
The same Rodney King mentality is what we see from the black community even now. Rodney King is a Philando Castile.
We need to get disruptive a little bit. We need to let them know our pain and what we feel.
Eric Garner.
Angry crowd tonight in the streets of
Jacob Blake.
Overnight fires and
Breonna Taylor.
Officers in no Dramatic videotape obtained.
Rodney King is the same thing that they're doing today.
The death of Eric Gardner. Philando Castile. Deadly police shootings.
And we are brainwashing people into believing a history that never happened.
Memorial Day marks 100 years since the Tulsa Race Massacre.
The infamous massacre that took place in Tulsa, Oklahoma, 1 century ago.
The worst incidents of racial violence in this country, the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921.
The Tulsa Massacre was a race riot before, 2018. These black activists and scholars turned it into the massacre.
Race massacre.
Race massacre.
Tulsa Race Massacre.
President Biden will visit Tulsa, Oklahoma to mark the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Race Massacre.
This was not a riot. This was a massacre.
That Tulsa Massacre is bullcrap.
A white mob killed some 300 black Americans.
300 black people died. That's not confirmed at all.
Descendants of the massacre are calling for justice.
They use this example as to why Black America was never able to build wealth.
It's pretty much a reflection of just the black experience in America in general.
Never able to pass down wealth generationally to their children.
What would our lives have been if we weren't robbed of our generational wealth?
They always point to this one place in Oklahoma, known as the Greenwood District, Black Wall Street. In the 20s, it was a model of black success. Black businesses, black churches, strong black family units. What we're taught is that the white people who lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma were jealous of the blacks who lived in Greenwood. We're told that they developed this plan to go in and destroy Black Wall Street, to displace these people who live there, to burn down these businesses, to kill as many black people as possible.
Black people in Tulsa have been oppressed ever since the massacre for 100 years.
That black success died in 1921 with the so-called massacre. There was a pastor in Oklahoma named Solomon Sir Jones. He was able to film a lot of black life during this time in Oklahoma. The riot happened in 1921. 1925, according to Solomon Sir Jones's footage, Black Wall Street was built back. And what you see is life as usual. after this so-called massacre. And then you fast forward even to the 1940s, you see the same thing. Successful, happy, well-to-do black folks.
You broke the contract when for 400 years we played your game and built your wealth. You broke the contract when we built our wealth again on our own by our bootstraps in Tulsa, and you dropped bombs on us.
This is the bitterness and this is the anger that these people hope to get out of framing Black Wall Street.
When they say, why do you burn down the community? Why do you burn down your own neighborhood? It's not ours. We don't own anything.
The whole point is to keep people angry, to keep people protesting, to tell you that America was never built for black people.
The reason we could never be who we wanted and dreamed of being is you kept your knee on our neck.
This part of Oklahoma was not the only place in the United States where black people were doing well. There are all sorts of black neighborhoods like that throughout the entire South. And the fact is, those schoolhouses aren't standing today. Those businesses aren't standing today. It wasn't white racism that destroyed it.
And we are going to demand that the government do something about these conditions, and we're going to demand that they stop cutting off poverty funds, which end up often making the rich richer and the poor poorer. We're going to do this, and I just want you to know.
Now he acted like a good nigga for the white folks. But I tell you, I don't want to even be around no more good niggas. I'm with them good Negros. That's what they call Rodriguez, a good Negro. I want to be with the bad niggas, because I know what's happening with the bad niggas. That's where I want to be. I want to be with the niggas.
The thing that killed all these black businesses was a mindset change as a result of the civil rights movement.
That is a major, tragic, and staggering depression that we face in our everyday lives.
The rats is sleeping with me and my kids, and why should I pay the rent? I'll go to court if you want me to.
How you gonna tell me to love this property that exploits me every day, when the average black man in Harlem works the first Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday for a landlord?
The thing that killed all this black success was rhetoric.
Racism is still alive in American society and much more widespread than we realize.
You guys have spent 60 years complaining about white people, where in the good old days when men were men and boys were boys, blacks were not doing that. They went out.
When was this time, Jesse? Please enlighten me and the listeners. When was that time?
Before the civil rights movement.
Booker T. Washington, through his Tuskegee machine, started what was called the Negro Business League. One of the proteges was a man named Philip Payton. Encouraged by Booker T. Washington, particularly his message of buying property, went to New York and saw an opportunity to buy one of the buildings there in Harlem, which was predominantly white at the time. So he bought this building, and then he began to buy more and more buildings. He started an Afro-American Realty Company. This began to spread, and other black realtors began to do the same thing. This was in the early 1900s, between 1900 and 1910. People began to migrate to Harlem. Individuals who were educated in the South. They were coming to Harlem not as dumb, ignorant former slaves, but as individuals who had education, who had skills. They brought with them all of the ingredients to really thrive and to really make it, and they were determined to make it. They became the black bourgeoisie. The narrative that we have today is that black people were always at the mercy of white people. That black people came with their hands out, and it was really up to the white person as to whether they will allow black people to exist or not. There's this commercial that Beats did where one of the lines is, "We don't get to exist.
We don't get to exist.
We are forced to survive."
We're forced to survive.
The narrative that that's trying to paint is that black people cannot make it and cannot put one foot in front of the other unless white people allow us to.
Why do you see white people as supreme
We
over
don't.
you? Yes,
We
you
don't.
do.
No,
You just said it here.
No, I didn't. White supremacy is a structural issue. Now, white people, and some white people, not all, some white people do feel that they are superior to black people.
No, you feel that they are.
No, I don't.
They don't feel that way.
No, I don't. We've made it very clear that we don't feel that way.
White people do not feel that way.
You can't speak for all white people.
I've had so many arguments with black people over the years. They say during Jim Crow era that everywhere black people went, they were being attacked, that black people lived in fear of white people.
You have a beautiful placard here that talks about drinking fountains.
Right.
And so when white folks are legislating where black people can get access to water, that is a structural form of racism.
But even when they had the for colors only drinking fountain, for white only, blacks were still doing better then than they are today because the men were not sitting around whining like little girls talking about white people holding them back.
Black folk had up 100 times more before social integration hit. See, I'm old enough to tell you all that. You all not old enough to know that yet. When I was a kid, see, we had something. We weren't looking for this social integration. You know why? Because we had our own businesses there. We had our own cab companies. We had our own restaurants. We had our own hotels. We had our own school systems. My family was part of one that had the only black bus line in the entire United States. All of our mechanics was blacks. All of our drivers were blacks. Electricians was black. Everything was black. When they killed our buses, social integration. When all of a sudden, you all started talking about Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King going down to Alabama, want to integrate the bus lines. Integrate whose bus line?
I have always ridden in the back of the bus because I didn't have guts to get in the front of the bus. But now the time had come. I was riding in the front of the bus.
Blacks in Winston-Salem says, we want to ride on front of some white buses. So we said, we don't have any white buses. They said, well, we'll get some so we can ride on the front of them.
I feel like a complete asshole because I never thought about that. Like that whole time they did the boycott, they should have been trying to establish their own bus company as opposed to wanting to ride. I never thought about that. Y'all boycotted for a year just to want to ride on the front?
See, you're a smart man.
I never thought about that.
but you got it now, right?
In 1905, black people were literally buying entire buildings. This idea that blacks were always at the mercy of whites is just asinine, at least when it came to Booker T. Washington and the effect that he had on those who put his ideas into practice. He really pushed vocation, learning skilled trades, becoming your own man, taking responsibility of your own communities. And then you saw this large exodus of black people out of those skilled trades.
Yeah.
Why do you think so many of them left work?
Because they fell for the lie of the so-called black leadership.
In the slave South, Negroes impoverished and mistreated have sought remedy by pouring into the cities.
W.B. Du Bois is a towering figure in Black intellectual history. And oftentimes people will pit Booker T. Washington and W.B. Du Bois against one another. Up from slavery, Booker T. Washington, W.B. Du Bois, the souls of Black folks. Booker T. Washington, Tuskegee Institute. W.B. Du Bois, the NAACP.
The NAACP collects billions of dollars for racial incitement. They go out of their way to create race issues, because the more race issues they create, the more they've got an appeal for begging for funds. But what do they do with that money? They do not spend one single cent to build any factories or shops to create jobs or to contribute to the development of free enterprise in our country. They're not interested in that.
They wanted to be the head of Black people. W.B. Du Bois was a traitor. He was an enemy of Black people and America. A socialist, a communist.
It was Mary White Ovington and other white socialists who started the NAACP. White socialists who sought to use Black Americans to carry out their socialist agenda. They needed a Black face. That's where W.E.B. Du Bois came in, to be the perceived leader, to appear as amiable to the Black masses, to Trojan horse this radical ideology.
This nation tries to prove its prosperity by balancing monopolized wealth of the owners of great corporations against the poverty of our lower third.
The NAACP was started by a white socialist woman, not a Black man. Whenever the NAACP began to take off, you had men like W.E.B. Du Bois trying to make a name for themselves. In order to make a name for themselves, they needed to sabotage men like Booker T. Washington, who had influence.
Unfortunately, it's only a Negro minority of intellectuals and leftist Negro preachers who presume to speak for all of the Negro people. They try to silence all opposition by calling anybody who disagrees with them Uncle Tom.
They want to disparage Booker T. Washington as the Uncle Tom. Booker T. Washington is this ultimate picture of the Black person who gives the white people what they want and lets them off the hook. And W.B. Du Bois is this hero because he airs the grievances and he calls white people to account.
Which is interesting because he was born to freed men. He was born well off. He didn't know what it was like to be raised in the South. Booker T. Washington was born and raised in the South. He was born into slavery. There was a way of simplicity about Washington. He was a very confident man. He was a man of faith. Du Bois was an atheist, very troubled and very paranoid. He was educated at Harvard, where he was trained to look with disdain at Western civilization and at capitalism in particular. And he saw Booker T. Washington as his intellectual enemy because Washington pushed utilizing capitalism instead of trying to do away with it.
You will find it true, not only in this country, but in other countries, that the demand will be more and more for people who can do something, regardless of color or condition. the world is going to give the places of trust and remuneration to men and women who can do a certain thing as well as anybody else or better. Just in proportion as we do this, you will find that nothing under the sun will keep us back.
I was able to look at this book called Harlem, A Century in Images. It gives you a timeline from its inception to its collapse. From the beginning, whether it's the kids in the classroom, the way that the people are dressed, the business owners, you see this classiness, that they're well put together, that they're self-respect, that they're dignified people. And then somewhere down the road, you have new players on the scene, preaching a certain message, a certain agitative, militant message. The faces go from being delighted, happy, and hopeful to all of a sudden being angry. The book captures, probably unknowingly, the story of Harlem.
Ideas have consequences. And if you follow these ideas through, what you get is the W.B. Du Bois story.
Many of us believe and hope that socialism will and must come to this land. We see no other way. But scores of others do not believe this, and that's their right. They have, however, no right to prevent the truth about socialism from being told. They have no right
Socialism.
to prevent students from studying the remarkable philosophy of Karl Marx.
Begging somebody to accept you, to love you. That's his legacy. You had black power in Harlem. You legitimately had that. What Booker T. Washington and his faction was able to build, W.E.B. Du Bois and his faction destroyed. That's the reality of Black Harlem.
Communists have planted the idea, don't do anything for yourself. Just get out there and fight and yell and scream and demand everything.
That spirit was implanted in them by W.E.B. Du Bois, who was positioned by white socialists.
Lashing civilization into niggers with drip of blood and roar of
He was doing the same things in his time.
There are only two ways to explain why black people were enslaved and white people,
as Ibram X. Kendi and others are doing today.
Fear is one of the dominant emotions of the black experience. Fear.
Selling out black people.
Out of the ashes of white denigration, we gave birth to ourselves.
For prestige. Doing what he's told.
But stop the spreading of lies about the socialist world.
Securing power for socialist demagogues.
As Americans, you have a right, a legal and constitutional right, to call yourselves communists.
The Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx, says that the communists latch on to any movement possible around the world in order to rein in their agenda, in order to materialize their efforts.
My people, the Negro people of America, have in the Communist Party their best defender, the unfailing champion of their cause.
I'm Julia Brown. For 9 years, I was a member of the Communist Party. During that time, I learned that the communist conspiracy had been planning and working to bring violent revolution to America. If all goes according to the communist blueprint, Americans will believe that the chaos and violence has something to do with civil rights.
We've heard people talk about Mississippi, and we heard people from Mississippi saying that things are so terrible in Mississippi until there's only one thing that will solve the problem in Mississippi is guerrilla warfare. We're going to put every cracker in Atlanta on his knees. We want that, we want that, we want that, we want.
Our enemies were quick to find our weakest point for their attack. They knew that racial differences could provide them with an excellent wedge to divide our people.
That's your enemy out there. Out there, he's your enemy. Don't you forget it, because I ain't, honky.
Their strategy simply has been to keep hammering on that wedge, to drive it deeper into our social structure, to open all wounds that have long since healed, and deliberately to create new ones wherever they can.
We are at war. Right. Fought behind the enemy's lines. You better get you some guns. Don't you forget it. They scared of my rifle. Wait till I get me an atomic bomb.
Having been on the inside, it's easy for me to recognize this revolutionary agitation in disguise. But the average American finds it's hard to believe that something as worthy and noble sounding as a civil rights movement could possibly be a communist maneuver.
We have to begin to ask the hard questions. Are there things culturally, are there things generationally that we've been doing, that we've been thinking, that we've been believing that are contributing to these problems? Are there things in some of those victories that we won that maybe flip things in a different direction than we thought? Did we begin to depend on the government at the expense of the strength of depending on our families and our fathers and our men?
This administration today, here and now, declares unconditional war on poverty in America.
Along came the Great Society. The war on poverty. The things that took away the incentive for family formation, made people dependent, made people think that they had a right to be taken care of. That was the death blow to the black community.
It's changed the psyche. We no longer think out of the framework of a Judeo-Christian ethic that is incumbent upon me to use the gifts that God has given me to meet my needs. And now we're depending upon the state.
This food stamp card ain't
ain't got number 17 cents on it.
Terry Clark says she stood in line for more than 6 hours at Clayton County's Human Services office because food stamp help for her 6 children unexpectedly ended.
There's no telling my kids that we can't eat. I'm not taking no, because my babies don't deserve that. When are y'all gonna come through? When you gonna come through? When I'm on my last pill? Or better yet, when I'm dead?
Me and my kids, they haven't ate since this morning. And I was supposed to get my food stamps yesterday and I didn't get nothing.
I sometimes wonder, what would America be had the blacks not fallen for the trap or the tricks of the so-called civil rights movement? Had they not gone with that but stayed on their course, how great would this generation of blacks be? They would be inventing things, creating things, and have a peace of heart and peace of mind. And they would be able to live with their neighbors without ideas and thoughts about being hated because of their color and things like that. It would be a different black people. It really would. But they sold their soul to the so-called civil rights leaders and so forth. Most have not been able to return.
It was difficult for me to realize what I realized about Martin Luther King. An American icon, a holy grail. Taking something that was once noble, the image of the black pastor, put his faith in God, put his family first, raised his children well, taught them productivity. That was the black community. People who were proud to be American. What Martin Luther King gives us is that image. But it's preaching a different message.
And it didn't cost the nation 1 penny to integrate lunch counters. Well, it didn't cost the nation 1 penny to guarantee the right to vote. But now we are dealing with issues that cannot be solved without the nation spending billions of dollars and undergoing a radical redistribution of economic power. Yeah.
We'll get into that next.
Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, help me stand. I am tired, I am weak, and I am worn. Through the storm